River to the Sea is probably my favourite film in the whole series. Ron was at his best writing poetry images for the film, and it's my favourite river, the Clyde River on the south coast of New South Wales. But the climax of the film is this here, when Rod Harrison tangled with this huge yellowfin and nearly gave up because it was just so tough. This is an exciting film. I do hope you enjoy it.
This is the story of a river, its journey to the sea and beyond. It's also the story of fishermen and the way they relate to the changing character of the river, until finally they break free of its influence many miles out to sea. This particular river has its beginnings back up here in some real tiger country. You can get into the stream on foot as it cuts through those hills, but I'm told it's something you only do once. As the steep hill country begins to roll out into foothills, the wild stream slows its pace to form up into a series of deep pools and shallow runs. This is strictly canoe territory. It is remote, beautiful, and about as peaceful a place as you could hope to find within a day's drive of a major population centre. With a small motor like this, you can explore miles upstream, cataloguing the bass cover as you go, then drift fish it all at leisure on the way back down. As you move downstream, the river continues to open out. The holes become longer and deeper. You start to get some road access, and it becomes possible to explore long reaches of water with conventional lightweight boats. Bass fishing is a unique branch of the fisherman's art. The fish lie up under cover during the day, hiding beneath snags, down trees and undercuts along the bank. It's not good enough to put a lure near the cover. It has to be right in there, right on his nose. All bass fishermen own around $1 million worth of lures, and these are guarded along much the same lines as the family jewels. With hundreds of lures to choose from, most fishermen still pin their hopes on a couple of old favourites, and they'll flog the water with these until the paint wears off. With the barometer falling, as it was this day, you can own all the lures in the world and fish as hard as you like, and you still won't catch bass. We don't care much either way, because we release most of the bass we land. But if you really want to catch one, remember that bit about the barometer. Moving downstream, the river continues to develop until the first bankside mangrove roots indicate the presence of salt water. From this point on, you get nearly 30 miles of navigable river, a boatman's paradise for exploring, fishing and camping. There are fish along the entire length of this system, but in the deep water reaches you need some local knowledge to know just where the holes are. The easiest place for most of us to locate fish is down towards the river mouth, where the mixture of tidal flats and channels provides water we can actually read for ourselves. Some of these sand flats are popular nipper pumping grounds, and it's often the case that good nipper banks are also good fishing spots. The state of the tide is sometimes more important than the time of day on the flats, although that combination of dusk or dawn and a good tide is hard to beat. A medium tide or a young rising tide is best for pumping bait. But even on the bottom of a big runoff, you can still get bait by working around these pools. Most of the best nipper grounds are endangered these days through overexploitation. Fishermen taking more bait than they need, then dumping what they don't use. The message with any kind of bait is to take only as much as you need, and it might even help to return unwanted live bait to the ground it was taken from. That's plenty for a reasonable fishing session on the rising tide. The bottom of the tide is usually rubbish fish time around here. Baby snapper by the 100, all armed with plenty of sharp spines to make release difficult. Mitch gets himself involved with an even bigger problem, but he'll still do his best to dodge the raised spine and release it as gently as possible. When that incoming tide starts to make, a magic transformation takes place on the sand flat. The rubbish fish are muscled aside, and in no time at all we have a hot brim bite on the go as a big school of fish moves in to feed over the flats. They're nice brim too. The fishing system is a simple one. Light line weighted with a sinker so small it will be carried along the bottom by the run of tide. It's just a matter of casting up into the tide, then letting the bait drift back until a fish takes it. To give you an idea how critical line size and sinker weight can be, we had 3 kilo line on the little black rod and 5 kilo on the white rod. The black rod with a lighter line and smaller lead took 3 out of every 4 fish we landed, no matter which of us fished with it. Finally, the run comes to an end, and we find ourselves fishing the slack water of a full flood tide again. And look who's back. The face looks familiar. And when Mitchell brings his next catch alongside, I know I've seen this pair before. They must work as a team. That's the end of it until the next run of tide. Time for tea and bickies before we tackle the chore of cleaning the fish. That's a nice little haul for 2 fellows. A morning's fun, a couple of good meals, and no harm done to the river. That's the way it should always be. This is the end of the road for the little boat, and for the river as a quiet body of water. Once over the bar, the river starts to interrelate with the sea in a complex exchange of water and marine life. These inshore flats and island environments are rich with life moving to and fro between river and sea. There are spawning runs of some species, creatures like prawns coming and going with the phases of the moon, the movements of migrating fish, movements influenced by the tides, and many fish that simply live and hunt in this large area. It's hot fishing country, but it also calls for something a little more substantial in the way of a boat. I have to admit that this is easily my favourite kind of area to fish these days. And by keeping the equipment simple but safe, it's something I can do alone. On the full moon, you can often enjoy excellent evening runs of snapper close inshore around the islands and shallow reefs. If you don't know a reef, these whitewater patches are as good a place as any to try. You just anchor off a good safe distance, then cast in close with floating baits of pilchard or garfish. Early in the afternoon, you might take a few salmon, tailor, king, or any of several other species that hunt in these waters. But as the light begins to fade, it's time to get serious. You can put out a floater and a bottom bait to cover all the options. Then it's time to pound that burley pot and invite a few reds up to dinner. This particular afternoon, the salmon decided to make a nuisance of themselves by hanging around later than usual. But it wasn't too long before the right kind of fish found that burley trail. I'd just as soon eat fish as anything else, and from that point of view, I can't think of anything I'd rather be putting into a boat than these small reds. Most times, these salmon are a neat fish to catch. Terrific fighters on light line, they can get to be a real nuisance when they muscle in on a run of snapper. Playing and landing them wastes a lot of valuable time when you know the reds will only stay on the bite for an hour or so. But it still pays to do the right thing and release them as quickly and gently as possible, even if it is only for your own peace of mind. Life is full of surprises around the rocks. When this fish took the bait, I thought I might be onto a nice snapper, but he turned out to be a brim. As is often the case when you get a brim at sea, this one was a horse. Just check the size of him. As good as it can be when the sun shines and the water is calm, life at sea is not always tea and bickies. You get your share of evenings when high wind and building seas make the exposed waters dangerous to fish. That's the time to tuck in under a lee and set your sights a little lower. With a little bread for burley and a few prawns for bait, you can use a float on a light rod to have the time of your life catching garfish. If you set the float so the bait sits just a few inches under the water, the gar will happily